It was a quiet morning in the city park. The sun had just started rising, and the streets were still half asleep. On a wooden bench near the fountain sat an old black man named Mr. Harris. His clothes were simple, a faded green jacket, an old hat, and heavy boots that looked like they had walked through time itself. Every morning he came here, fed the birds, and watched people rush to work. To most, he was invisible. Just another lonely old man. But there was something about his eyes, sharp, steady, and deep. Like he had seen things most people couldn't imagine. A group of 3 young men entered the park laughing loudly. They were the kind who loved attention, loud music, gold chains, and empty talk about being tough. Their leader, Troy, spotted Mr. Harris sitting alone. "Look at that old man," he said with a smirk. "Probably broke and crazy. Let's have some fun." His friends laughed. They walked toward Mr. Harris, pretending to be friendly at first. "Hey, old man, you got some change?" Troy asked, stepping closer. Mr. Harris looked up slowly, calm and polite. "Sorry, son. I don't carry money when I come here," he said softly. That calm answer made Troy's smirk fade. He wanted a reaction, some fear, some anger. But Mr. Harris didn't give him that. He just looked back at the fountain, feeding the pigeons. "Don't ignore me, old man," Troy shouted, kicking the ground near him. The birds scattered, and the park grew silent. Mr. Harris sighed. "There's no reason to shout, son. You'll scare the birds." His voice was steady, almost fatherly. The other 2 thugs laughed, thinking he was weak. One of them, Marcus, grabbed Mr. Harris's hat and tossed it onto the ground. "You gonna do something, Grandpa?" he sneered. A few people nearby stopped and watched, unsure whether to help. Mr. Harris slowly stood up. His movements were calm but firm. He bent down, picked up his hat, and brushed off the dust. Then he looked at Troy straight in the eyes. "You boys should go," he said quietly. "You don't want trouble." The tone in his voice changed. It was no longer soft or weak. There was power behind it, something that made Troy hesitate for a second. But his pride didn't let him back down. "Trouble? From you?" He laughed. "You can barely stand, old man." Mr. Harris didn't answer. His eyes didn't blink. For a moment, Troy felt like those eyes were reading him, measuring him, like a soldier would before a fight. Marcus pushed Mr. Harris's shoulder. "Say something, old man." In one quick move, faster than anyone expected, Mr. Harris grabbed Marcus's wrist and twisted it. Marcus screamed in pain, dropping to his knees. It all happened in a second. Troy and the other friend froze. The calm old man now looked different, focused, alert, dangerous. "Enough," Mr. Harris said firmly, letting go. "Walk away." "I won't say it again." The young men backed off a few steps, confused and angry. They had never seen someone move like that, especially an old man. Mr. Harris sat back down as if nothing had happened. Feeding the birds again, Troy whispered to Marcus, "We'll deal with him later. Nobody embarrasses me like that." They walked away, throwing threats behind their backs. But Mr. Harris didn't respond. He just stared at the fountain, his hands still and calm. Inside his jacket pocket, something glimmered, an old Vietnam medal. Worn and scratched, but still shining faintly in the light. He looked at it for a moment and sighed deeply. "You never really leave the battlefield," he muttered to himself. The people who had been watching slowly returned to their routine, whispering about the strange old man who had moved like a trained fighter. But no one knew his past. No one knew what he had survived. Because behind that calm smile, Mr. Harris carried memories darker than any of them could imagine. The sun had barely set when Mr. Harris returned to his small apartment on the edge of the city. It was a quiet place, just one room, a bed, and a wall covered with old photographs. Most were black and white. Some showed soldiers in uniforms smiling despite the dirt on their faces. One picture stood out, a young man standing next to a helicopter, holding his helmet with pride. That young man was Mr. Harris, more than 50 years ago, in the jungles of Vietnam. He placed his worn-out hat on the table and sat down slowly. His knees ached from the years, but his mind was sharp. He could still hear the sound of helicopters, the cries of wounded soldiers, and the smell of smoke in the air. Every night those memories returned, not as dreams, but as reminders of who he once was. He turned on the small radio. The news talked about rising crime, gangs, and senseless violence. Mr. Harris shook his head. "They fight for nothing," he whispered. "They don't even know what real war is." Suddenly there was a loud knock at the door. 3 hard bangs. He froze for a second, listening carefully. His instincts sharpened. He reached for the walking cane beside the bed. Not just a cane, but a modified one with a hidden metal core. Slowly, he opened the door. Standing outside were Troy and his 2 friends. Their faces carried anger and pride mixed with something darker, shame. The park humiliation still burned in them. "Well, look who's home," Troy said, smirking. "Thought you could make a fool out of us, huh?" Mr. Harris's eyes didn't flinch. "You shouldn't have come here," he said in his calm voice. "This is my home." Marcus stepped forward, rubbing his wrist. "You broke my hand, old man. Now I'll break you," Mr. Harris sighed. "I didn't break it. I taught you a lesson. But it seems you didn't learn." The boys laughed, trying to act brave. "You think you're some kind of tough guy?" Troy said, pushing the door open. "You're just a weak old fool." Mr. Harris didn't argue. He simply stepped back, letting them inside. "If you're going to make a mistake, at least make it quick," he said quietly. The confidence in his tone caught them off guard again. The apartment was dimly lit, filled with military medals, old maps, and a folded American flag framed on the wall. "What's this?" Marcus asked, picking up a medal. "That," Mr. Harris said, "is the Silver Star. Earned it when I pulled 5 men out of enemy fire." Troy scoffed. "You lying, old man? You expect us to believe you were a soldier?" Mr. Harris smiled faintly. "I don't need you to believe me. I just need you to leave." But they didn't. Troy swung his arm and knocked the medal off the shelf. It hit the floor with a metallic sound. Something inside Mr. Harris changed. His calm eyes hardened. His back straightened, his body posture shifting from relaxed to ready, like a soldier preparing for battle. "Pick it up," he said, his voice cold. "What if I don't?" Troy sneered. "Then you'll regret it." Before Troy could react, Mr. Harris moved. He stepped forward, grabbed Troy's wrist, twisted it, and pushed him against the wall. Marcus charged, but Harris ducked, kicked his knee, and sent him crashing into the table. The 3rd boy froze, shocked at how fast it all happened. Mr. Harris stood tall, breathing steady, his face emotionless. "You boys think strength is in noise and anger," he said. "But strength is control. It's discipline. That's what you don't have." Troy struggled to his feet, clutching his arm. "You'll pay for this," he shouted, backing away toward the door. "We'll get you, old man. You just wait." Mr. Harris didn't move. "I'll be right here," he said quietly. As they ran out, he picked up the fallen medal and placed it back on the shelf. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the memories that came flooding back. The adrenaline, the movement, control, it all reminded him of the battlefield. He sat down and stared at the medal for a long time. "I thought I left the war behind," he murmured. "But the war never leaves you." Outside, the streetlights flickered. In the darkness, Troy watched the window from across the street, his eyes burning with hate. "He'll regret ever touching me," he muttered. "We'll teach that old man a lesson he'll never forget." But what Troy didn't know was that the lesson had already begun. The following morning, the park was quieter than usual. Early mist hung above the grass, and the bench where Mr. Harris sat looked abandoned. But he was there, as always, feeding the birds before heading out. His world had changed overnight. The confrontation with the young thugs weighed on him, brought memories to the surface he thought he'd buried. As he scattered breadcrumbs, his mind drifted back to Vietnam. He remembered nights under the jungle canopy, the roar of rockets, the terrified faces of young men who never came home. The metal in his coat pocket felt heavier now. Not just metal. A reminder. A warning. At that moment, a gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. "Morning, sir." Mr. Harris looked up. Standing before him was a younger man, early 30s, uniform crisp. He introduced himself as Officer James Walker, the new park ranger assigned to this area. He carried a small notebook, and his eyes were curious, respectful, "Good morning," Mr. Harris replied. "Beautiful day for the birds." James nodded. "Yes, sir." "Mind if I ask, you're here every day, right?" Mr. Harris smiled faintly. "I come to watch, to remember." The ranger paused. "Actually, sir, I wanted to talk about what happened yesterday." He motioned to the path where Troy and his friends had walked off. "I saw the boys leaving. I also saw how you handled things." The mention of handled things, Mr. Harris tensed. He didn't want anyone digging into that moment, the twitch of his old soldier reflexes, the way he'd reacted without thinking. But James continued, "You were calm, firm, didn't get angry, did exactly what you needed. That's unusual." Mr. Harris looked at the pigeons, then back to the ranger. "Sometimes calm is all you can do." And James scribbled something. Then he raised his head. "Sir, if you ever feel unsafe, or if they return, you should call me. The park has cameras now. I'll monitor." That offer surprised Mr. Harris. He nodded. "Thank you, son." They talked a bit longer, the quiet hum of city traffic in the distance, the soft cooing of doves. James asked about the bench, the early morning routine. Mr. Harris answered lightly, not revealing the war memories, but enough to show a man shaped by something. Then James left to patrol the other side of the park. After James walked away, Mr. Harris watched him go. He wondered, had he found an ally? Someone who understood strength without shouting. In his mind, he recognized a younger version of himself. Someone trying to protect, to serve even now. That afternoon, as Mr. Harris returned to his apartment, he felt unease in the hallway. A note lay slipped under his door. "Next time, no warning." His heart skipped a beat. The confrontation wasn't over. Troy's voice echoed in his mind. "We'll get you." Inside, he locked the door and picked up the medal. He turned it in his palm, remembering the faces of his fallen brothers, the jungle fire, the smell of wet earth. "You never left the battlefield," he whispered. He sat quietly in the dim light, thinking of strategies. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he wouldn't go back to being an easy target either. He needed a plan. He needed resolve. His body may be old, but his mind still commanded. The next morning, back in the park, James appeared again. "Sir," he asked gently, "do you want company? I can walk with you for a bit." Mr. Harris hesitated. Then he nodded. They walked the path near the fountain together in silence. But that silence felt different, protective. James glanced over. "You okay?" "Yes," Harris said softly. "Just remembering." James stopped. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, were you in the service?" Harris paused, looked at him. For a moment, nothing. Then he nodded slowly. "Yes." James didn't ask more. He just walked by his side. That was respect. But as they passed the path where the confrontation had taken place, Mr. Harris saw Troy again, leaning against a tree, watching them. His friends hidden in the shadows, a sneer on his face, a promise of trouble. James noticed too. He stepped forward. "Sir, stay behind me." Mr. Harris followed silently, his mind alert. The birds flapped away, sensing something wrong. James reached for his radio. Troy pushed off from the tree, face dark. The standoff held for a moment. Then Troy disappeared into the shadows. Harris exhaled. The younger man stood by him, calm but steady. "He'll come back," Harris said quietly. "And next time, the peace ends." James nodded. "I won't let that happen." They walked on. The bench, the fountain, the quiet park, a battlefield of a different kind. Night fell heavy over the city. The park, once calm and full of birds, turned into a pool of shadows. Mr. Harris sat near his window, the faint glow from a street lamp washing over his metals. His mind was uneasy. Something about Troy's stare that morning had felt different, colder, more dangerous. He had been threatened before, but this was not the usual street talk. It carried intention. He checked the locks on his doors again, his instincts whispering warnings he hadn't felt in years. In Vietnam, the silence before an ambush was never quiet. It was thick, alive. He could feel that same kind of silence now. Suddenly there was movement outside. A car engine turned off a block away. Voices young, loud, careless, but trying to be quiet. Mr. Harris stood motionless. He reached into a small wooden box under his bed. Inside was an old army knife, polished and well kept. Not a weapon of aggression, a reminder of survival. He picked up his cane and waited by the door. Minutes passed. Then a knock. He didn't answer. Another knock, louder this time. Then a voice. "Old man, open up. We just want to talk." Mr. Harris didn't move. He recognized Troy's tone. Behind it were the muffled laughs of his friends. He quietly moved toward the back of the apartment, to the narrow kitchen window that faced the alley. His mind calculated distances, exits, possibilities. The doorknob rattled. Then a loud bang as someone kicked the door. Wood cracked, but didn't break. "Kick it again." Another voice yelled. Before the next hit landed, flashing blue lights appeared down the street. Tires screeched. A police cruiser stopped in front of the building. Officer James stepped out. Troy and his crew froze. "Cops!" Marcus hissed. They turned to run, but James was faster. "Stop right there," he shouted, flashlight in hand. The beam caught their faces. Troy raised his hands slowly. "We didn't do nothing." "Then why are you outside this man's home?" James demanded. Mr. Harris opened the door just enough to see what was happening. His expression was calm, but his heartbeat raced. He didn't want arrests, he wanted understanding. Still, James had arrived at the perfect time. "These boys again?" James asked, glancing back at Harris. "Yes," Harris replied softly. "They keep coming back." James stepped closer to Troy. "You got a problem with this man?" Troy clenched his jaw. "He started it." "Hit my friend?" James looked unimpressed. "Then your friend should thank him for not pressing charges." He turned toward the others. "You think picking on an old man makes you strong? Try picking on me instead." The boys backed away. James took down their names, made them promise to stay away, and watched until they disappeared down the street. Then he turned back to Mr. Harris. "Sir, you okay?" Mr. Harris nodded. "Yes, thank you," James sighed. "They'll probably stay quiet now. But if they don't, I'll handle it." Mr. Harris gave a small smile. "You remind me of someone," he said. "Who?" "A young soldier I once knew, brave but too honest for his own good." James smiled faintly. "That sounds like me." Later that night, after the cruiser left, Mr. Harris sat back down on his couch, but sleep didn't come. He knew the boys wouldn't stop so easily. Pride was a dangerous fuel. They'd be back, not with fists this time. Maybe with something worse. He placed the army knife back into its box and whispered, "You never wanted another war, Harris. But sometimes war finds you." Outside in the distance, Troy's car headlights flashed once and vanished into the dark. The threat wasn't gone, only waiting. The next few days passed in uneasy silence. Mr. Harris returned to his morning routine, feeding the birds, sitting on his bench and pretending life was calm again. But deep down, he knew peace was fragile. The looks from strangers felt longer, the wind colder. He could sense trouble gathering like dark clouds before a storm. Officer James checked in every morning now. "You sure you're okay, sir?" he would ask. Mr. Harris always answered with the same calm tone. "I've seen worse." But that calmness wasn't confidence, it was experience. He'd learned long ago that fear didn't help you fight. Awareness did. On Friday evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, James drove by the park again. He didn't see Troy or his friends, but something felt off. The same black car that had followed him earlier that week was parked near Harris's apartment. He made a mental note. Meanwhile, inside his small room, Mr. Harris sat at his table, polishing an old lighter engraved with initials. J.H.'s hands were steady, but his mind was restless. "You survived the jungle," he whispered to himself. "You'll survive this." Suddenly, his phone buzzed, an unknown number. He picked it up. A familiar voice sneered. "Old man, remember us?" "Troy," Mr. Harris said quietly. "You embarrassed me twice," Troy continued. "This time, no cops, no mercy. Tonight, we finish this." The line went dead. Mr. Harris took a slow breath. He knew the call wasn't a bluff. He walked to his closet, opened a small trunk, and took out an old duffel bag. Inside were pieces of his past, a worn camouflage jacket, a compass, and a folded letter signed by a fallen friend. He wasn't preparing for revenge. He was preparing to stay alive. At 9 p.m., the park was empty. Streetlights flickered. In the distance, footsteps echoed, quick, aggressive. Troy and his crew moved like hunters, whispering plans. "We hit him fast," Troy said. "In and out." No police this time. Mr. Harris was already waiting. He had locked his doors and turned off the lights. The sound of boots scraping the pavement told him exactly where they were. Years of training came alive again. His breathing slowed. His hearing sharpened. A window shattered. Glass spilled across the floor. The first intruder climbed in, Marcus. Before he could take a step, Mr. Harris spoke from the darkness. "You shouldn't have come." Marcus spun around, flashlight shaking. "Where are you, old man?" From behind, Mr. Harris grabbed the boy's shoulder and twisted his arm down. Marcus dropped the flashlight. The beam hit the wall, revealing medals and photos. For a split second, Marcus froze. He saw the truth. This wasn't just an old man. This was a soldier. Troy kicked open the back door, yelling, "Finish him!" The room erupted. Harris moved with precision. No wasted motion, no anger, only discipline. He ducked a punch, swept one thug's legs, and shoved him toward the wall. The crash echoed through the apartment. Troy raised a metal pipe. Harris blocked it with his cane. The impact jolted his arm, but he pushed forward, twisting the cane, disarming Troy in one sharp move. The pipe clanged to the floor. "Still think I'm weak?" Harris asked, voice low and steady. Troy backed away, panting. "You're crazy, man." "No," Harris said. "Just trained." At that moment, flashing lights flooded the street again. Officer James burst through the doorway, weapon drawn. "Everyone freeze," he shouted. Troy dropped to his knees, hands up. His friends followed, trembling. Harris stood still, breathing heavy but controlled. James rushed to him. "Sir, you okay?" Mr. Harris nodded slowly. "Yes, it's over now." But as the young officer looked around the wrecked room, the shattered window, the broken pipe, the metals glinting on the floor, he realized something. This wasn't just an old man defending himself. This was a soldier reliving a battle he never truly left. Outside, as the boys were taken away, Mr. Harris sat quietly on his steps. The night wind brushed against his face. "No one wins in war," he murmured, staring at the stars. "You just survive." The morning after the chaos, the park was peaceful again. Sunlight danced across the fountain. Birds chirped softly, and the old wooden bench stood waiting like it always did. But this time, when Mr. Harris sat down, there was no sense of danger in the air. Only quiet. A quiet he had earned. He wore his old jacket, the one with the faded U.S. Army patch on the sleeve. On his chest hung a single medal, the silver star he had once buried in a drawer, trying to forget the man he used to be. Today he wore it not for pride, but for remembrance. Across the park, Officer James approached with 2 cups of coffee. "Morning, sir," he said, handing one over. "Morning, son," Harris replied, his voice calm, but his eyes tired. "Did they say what'll happen to those boys?" James nodded, sitting beside him. "They'll face charges, breaking and entering, assault, and property damage. The judge might give them community service instead of jail time, though. They're young. They can still change." Mr. Harris took a slow sip of coffee. "Good," he said softly. "Let them learn before life teaches them harder." James glanced at the medal on his jacket. "You really were a soldier, huh?" Harris smiled faintly. "Once, in a place no one wanted to be. Vietnam, 1968. I was 19. Thought I knew what bravery meant." "What did it mean to you back then?" James asked. "Back then," Harris said, looking toward the horizon, "it meant surviving. Now, it means restraint." For a moment, silence hung between them. The park felt alive again, people walking dogs, children laughing, but deep in Mr. Harris's heart, something had changed. The war inside him had finally quieted, not gone, but at peace. James leaned forward. "Sir, if you don't mind, I want to ask, how did you stay calm when they attacked you? Most people would have panicked." Harris smiled gently. "You learn in war that anger clouds your aim. When you're calm, you see everything, every move, every sound. Fear makes you fast, but control makes you precise." James nodded slowly, as if memorizing every word. "I could use that lesson myself." "Maybe that's why we met," Harris said, chuckling. "The young soldier and the old one." Just then, a soft voice interrupted. It was a woman in her 30s, holding a little boy's hand. "Excuse me, sir," she said, smiling shyly. "I saw what happened that night. I live across the street. You saved those kids from doing something worse." Mr. Harris blinked in surprise. "Save them?" "Yes," she said. "You could have hurt them bad, but you didn't. You stopped them without destroying their lives. That's real strength." She handed him a small folded note. "We collected something for you to fix your window." He looked down at the envelope, thick with cash, and shook his head. "No, ma'am. I can't take this," she insisted. "Please, it's not charity. It's gratitude." Mr. Harris finally accepted it, smiling humbly. "Thank you," he said. The little boy looked up and saluted him. "You're a hero, mister." For the first time in years, Mr. Harris felt something warm in his chest. Not pride, purpose. As the woman walked away, James grinned. "You see, sir? You still make a difference." Mr. Harris nodded slowly. "Maybe, but I didn't fight for medals or thanks. I fought so people could live without fear. Even fools like those boys." James looked down thoughtfully. "You gave them a second chance." Harris glanced at the birds fluttering near the fountain. "Everyone deserves one," he said. A long silence followed. Then, softly, Harris added, "The real war isn't fought with guns anymore. It's fought here." He tapped his chest. "Between who we were and who we choose to be." James smiled. "Then I'd say, sir, you won yours." Mr. Harris chuckled. "No, son. I just stopped fighting it." The two men sat quietly, watching the morning unfold, the world moving on, unaware that one old soldier had just found peace as the breeze rustled the trees. The sunlight caught the edge of his metal, and for the first time in decades, Mr. Harris didn't look back at the past with pain, but with pride.